This reading is from the Bhagavad Gita. This is chapter 13, verse 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. The true insight bestowed by wisdom is revealed in the following qualities: humility, unpretentiousness, harmlessness, forgiveness, integrity, service to the Guru, purity of mind and body, steadfastness, and self-control. Indifference to sense objects, lack of emphasis on one's own self, perception of the sufferings and evils inherent in birth, illness, old age, and death, non-attachment, non-identification of the ego with one's own children, wife, and home, and with everything that these entail, equal acceptance of both fortune and misfortune, unswerving devotion to and identity with me through yoga practice, love of solitude, disinclination for worldly society, perseverance in the pursuit of self-knowledge, aspiration toward true wisdom, which is the goal of all learning. Qualities that oppose these virtues are the signs of ignorance. The above listed qualities speak for themselves. They are the mark of one who is intent on absorbing his little self in the self of all. Whatever duties he has on earth, the examples listed here are duties to one's children, wife, and home, must be fulfilled without ego identification. The yogi must perceive God as equally present in all. Living in this world, he must constantly remind himself that birth, life, and death are passing phenomenon and are fraught with suffering and pain, paired inevitably with earth's pleasures and fulfillments. He should not identify himself, therefore, with anything outward. Whenever possible, he should seek seclusion for 1 or 2 weeks a year or for longer periods to immerse himself in the thought of God. He should not dislike worldly company, since to dislike anything is to create a disturbance in the citta or feeling. He may not always find it convenient to avoid such society, but he should be conscious of and accept as the right attitude for a devotee an inner disinclination for it. Thus, if he must sometimes attend worldly gatherings, he should relate to people from a firm center of calmness within himself. Intellectual knowledge for its own sake is not a worthy pursuit for anyone who seeks wisdom. Knowledge is the possession of a mere catalog of facts. Wisdom is the understanding of how to use facts in the quest for enlightenment in the self. Om, Om, Om.
It is a joy to hear these words in the Gita, and one of the reasons why I wanted to hear from the Gita this morning is because, to my surprise, I have encountered a little bit of, I can't say resistance to the Gita, but when I bring up the Gita with some people, their eyes kind of glaze over as if to say, yes, it's too complicated for me. And I wonder why that is. I mean, in one way it's obvious because when, for example, in America, many people are not raised with the Gita, and so by the time they really come to it seriously, they are adults, they are yogis, that's why they're coming to it, and they're eager for the teachings of this scripture, and they also don't have a lot of past experience with it. And so, whereas if you bring up the Bible, if they were raised Christian, some of them will have a kind of, because they've had it perhaps in ways that are unpalatable. That was certainly my experience. I went, vain dumb. And And we see the same thing happens here in India, that when we have introduced the Bible or different teachings from the life of Christ or Master's explanations of it, or also I remember we were having a sing-along of the Swamiji's oratorio, and people were hearing the life of Jesus told in these songs, and one person just said, "This is just so beautiful, and it's just like the life of Krishna." I mean, it's Sanatan Dharma, meaning it's the same truth, not it's like what we have in India. It's that these two things are the same universal truth. And she said, "It's just so wonderful. I had no idea. It was so fantastic." And I couldn't help but say, this isn't the only way that it's presented to people. You're getting it sort of at the highest level of clarity and completely in tune with this path, as in fact the life of Christ is. But there are other ways, other experiences, and let's just say those are more common. And so it's the same thing with the Gita, which I didn't expect when I was inviting a few people to a Gita class or talking about. They're saying, "Oh, Gita, it's too complicated for me." And it's like, well, we're not studying it in the original Sanskrit, so you don't have to worry. It will be in a language familiar to you, in this case English. No, that's not it. And I wonder why that is. And I think could be this same kind of having previous experiences with it that were perhaps less than gratifying. That in order to study the Gita, you must dress only in white, and you must wake up at 3:30 in the morning and do Surya Namaskaram until 9:30 in the morning, or until you faint, whichever happens first. And then you must have fasted for a week, and then you can open the front cover. But you might not be worthy to turn the page. Or there you can have the other kind of thing, that you see somebody who can just, rattle off different slokas, maybe in Sanskrit, or give different interpretations that are very complex, which is wonderful. I mean, the Gita is beautiful, it's not that. But it sort of gives this impression that you have to have such a brain in order to be able to grasp really any of this. And I don't know if that's the only reason. I suspect there are others. But there's no need to feel that way. Partly because the Gita is clear. Even as a scripture, even just if you had no commentary on it at all. Even if you have a bad translation into English or to Tamil. Even a bad translation is still pretty good. I say that of the Gita because the Gita really is that clear. It's not true of the Yoga Sutras. Every translation just about is bad. Yoga is the cessation of the mental modifications of mind stuff. If that's what yoga is, I have no idea how to practice it. And I don't know what I've been doing all these years. It's just mental modifications, and it's just ridiculous. It's just, again, intellectual. Master in his commentaries, his speeches on the Yoga Sutras, you would hear him read the sutra and say, "See how badly this has been translated," and so on. And he'd just say, "That's not the right word, this is the right word," and so on. But with the Gita, even if it's not clear, it's still clear enough. And partly because Krishna does repeat himself in places for emphasis. So I'm sort of on a Gita re-education festival or something, maybe just alone, but I hope not, because it's like reintroducing this and coming to it as a yogi. First of all, someone may be able to tell you all the history of Kurukshetra. They may be able to tell you how many, what's the word here for land? How many, it's not plots, but what's the measurement of land when you buy land? We would say acres, but there's another, grounds. How many grounds Kurukshetra is, and what the circumference is, and which part falls in Delhi state, and and they can tell you in Hastinapur actually there were, and all this stuff. And again, it's wonderful. It's not that there's anything wrong with it, but they may be able to tell you about Indraprasthra, but you may have been at Indraprasthra in the past, in your past life. They may be able to tell you all the stories of Krishna. You may have been with him, and they may have been too. But the point is, this is your own. Because why? You are following Krishna's advice to Arjuna. Be thou a yogi. That's what he says. Be a yogi. What does Krishna say to Arjuna in addition to everything else? What are the very few things he says with verbs? Not just, this is the sign of the wise man, and so by inference, if you want to be wise, this is how you do it. He says, be a yogi. And what is a yogi but one seeking union with God? Is that what you're seeking? Yes. And so, this is for you. Add to the fact that Babaji was Krishna and Master was Arjuna. I mean, if you uncovered some sort of hidden scrolls or palm leaf manuscripts of a conversation between Babaji and Master, would you say, oh, I'm sure it's too complicated for me? Sri Yukteswar, maybe. But no, I'm kidding. Not even. Of course not. You would say, let me at it. Anything, any way I can feel closer to them. I would like to study it. So remember, it is your own. Don't worry about whatever past experiences you've had with it. Good, bad, or indifferent. And I say this from personal experience. I decided once when I was wanting to learn more about this Indian philosophy and all this stuff about God, when I was very much not interested. This was actually in Theosophical Society, just down the road in 1997. No, before that, 1995 maybe. Anyway, I picked a book off the shelf saying, okay, let's just see if you have anything to tell me. Because, of course, 1995.
Down the road in New Jersey.
No, I mean in Adyar. No, Theosophical Gardens here.
You weren't there.
I was.
Oh!
Yeah. I think I was. Yeah, so I was visiting Chennai in 1995.
Okay.
And down the road from here, yeah.
The dateline.
Yeah. And so it happened to be here, and so, I mean...
With your cousins.
Yeah, exactly. I was visiting my cousins here. And not only that, but I sort of dared Theosophical Society in Chennai to tell me anything, and I didn't like what it gave me, and I've been paying for it ever since, because here we are back in Chennai making up for it. But the book said, beware the constant treachery of the senses. And I thought, how ridiculous. Treachery of the senses. The senses don't betray you. They tell you how things are. And this is like making people paranoid. Like, oh, I shouldn't trust my senses. Makes you weak. Ridiculous. Not realizing how much I was in the grip of my own senses. When I said, the treachery of the senses, stupid, untrue. My senses all went, excellent, we've got him. Yeah, exactly. Let's have nachos. Let's have a party, and who needs all of this? And then why do I have a stomach ache? Must be the philosophy. And so I rejected it. I didn't like the way it was presented to me, and I hadn't lived enough and, frankly, suffered enough to be seeking help. That's really what it comes to on the spiritual path, is we love to seek God for His joy, but we also seek Him because we're running away from the, flames that are at our heels, chasing us. And in fact, it really is that way, that on the one hand, people often come to the spiritual path because of a heartbreak or a broken expectation. And that can be very helpful, especially if we think of a heartbreak as the heart breaking open. Not breaking in half, but breaking open. That there is a hard shell of egoity, of I can do it myself. If I have enough in line, life is 90% the way I want it. I just have to get this other 10, and then I'll be perfect. And then blindsided, broken open, and then, okay, I need help. What I have wanted, I haven't gotten. And what I thought I had has been taken. And this can happen not just getting us onto the spiritual path, but repeatedly once we get onto the spiritual path. And it's just God helping us to go deeper in the way that we ourselves want. God only answers the prayers that are asked. He doesn't just say to somebody, I know you don't really want self-realization, but I've got a few extras here, so I'll just give you one. It's not that way. We have to have asked for it. We have to want it. The good thing is that once we sincerely desire God, And since every desire has to be fulfilled by the law of karma, as Master said, if you strongly want God, then He has to come to you, and your liberation is assured. And that is why sometimes we find ourselves driven on to the spiritual path, even as people have told me, against their will. One person said, I woke up this morning and I saw that the class was today and I decided not to come, and here I am. Someone else said, when I saw that it was going to be 2 o'clock, I said I won't go because of whatever, and something made me to come. My feet started walking me there, and it was like, where are we going? And so they found themselves at CIT Nagar and then went in. Why? Because of that desire for God that we've had in the past. All of our past lives are saying, please, please, you don't know what I went through to get you here. Don't screw it up. And so that push from before continues to push us. We were observing this in the level 1 class yesterday, that so many of the students, actually interestingly, some of them had seen the Answer film. And that's what brought them to the class. So that was very sweet to see, because we'd never heard that one before. I saw the film, and so then I Googled, and here I am. So it was wonderful. And think of that as your first introduction to Master or these teachings, how much, of a understanding you can get from that impression from that film, also vibrationally. And so, but so many of them were saying, I have been drawn to yoga. I have practiced yoga, but I want to go deeper. I sometimes get sucked into money-making and concerns, but something always tells me I have to come back to this yoga. Why? Well, just because we've practiced it before. And because we've already said, God, I want you. And so He says, okay, I'm going to hold you to it. And so then in another lifetime we're saying, God, I want that. Or I want rest. And then something in us is bursting inside or restless against that, saying, no, I want more than this. As that song that we were singing, why barter like a beggar? Why bargain like a beggar? You have wealth everywhere. If you're seeking freedom, you don't have to negotiate. You don't have to say, one little crumb is enough for me and I'll sit in the corner quietly, and as long as I don't disturb anyone, maybe they'll let me stay. Life isn't like that. It feels like that sometimes, but it isn't that way. So the other thing that I'm sort of thinking of what got me onto the path, spiritual path, is related to this. The qualities of the wise person that Krishna lists here. I was very uninterested in religion, again, because whatever I had encountered of it, I had not liked. Now, I didn't make any serious investigation into it either. If I happen to see something and not like it, it's like, well, why don't you try other things? Why don't you do research? Why don't you? No, thanks. And that's another thing. Is that bad karma? Is that rejection? Sometimes we do have a cloud over the mind. If we have rejected the path in the past, we have to work to fight to get back on it. For the same reason as I said before, what do we want? We had at one point perhaps said, I don't want to be on the path anymore. And so then the tide of our karma took us that way. And then after a while, going out with the tide, saying, wait, no, I do want that. Say, okay, well, finding yourself here, you have to claw your way back. Can't just say, no, I just want it, and then you come back. Sometimes you can if you have enough previous momentum. But we have to not really prove it to ourselves or earn the right, but we have to shift the direction of the momentum. Remember physics and PV or MV or something? I never really understood momentum that well. It's just this, which direction are we facing and are we running in? Not where are we? You see? Because we could say, see how far I am. Well, as one person pointed out to me, I was thinking how much I had grown and how far I'd come without realizing that, well, what if God is just one step away, but I'm standing with my back turned saying, see how far I have come. Instead of, but where are you going? Why not just finish the whole job? And that's the point. So I was very standoffish towards religion of any kind. But when I came to India, this was, I I think this probably had to be the same visit. Again, it was in Chennai, coincidentally. Again, this was probably 1997. Yeah, 1997. And this time at the Madras Book Fair. And so I asked a friend of mine who was there, what are some books on Indian religion that I could have? So he said, here is Ramayana, here is Mahabharata, and maybe a few other things. And so I, got those books. And I started reading the Ramayana. And I was kind of going along, the story's okay, and it's nice and following it. And then Kaikeyi does sort of some bad thing, and then, it doesn't seem quite fair, and then suddenly Rama's banished from the kingdom. Okay, well, they're okay. The plot thickens, and so kind of going on. And then just in the middle of it, there's a description of Rama. This is Kausalya Subramanian, if you know her. Her books are pretty well known. And it was a description of him as an ideal person. And it said things like he was truthful and he was brave and all these things. But it also said something else. It said, if anyone had done him a kindness, he would remember it forever. And if he had done anyone a kindness, he would instantly forget it. And I just thought, that's so beautiful, and it's so real, and this is Treta Yuga, and so on. I didn't know it at that time, but this is so many thousands of years ago, and it's expressing something that anyone can relate to now, and it's something I never noticed before. I would not have thought of that as the mark of greatness. You sort of think of some kind of greatness like this, not in this way, which actually requires much more strength. Sometimes when Swamiji's talked about these qualities, he mentions some of these in the Nayaswami order book, that humility, unpretentiousness, harmlessness, forgiveness, purity of mind and body. Someone was saying, are you sort of counseling people to become wimps? Just harmless and, innocent and pure, and you know how much strength it takes to be anywhere near these qualities in ourselves, to actually be harmless, not only in action, but not only in speech, but also in thought. Just, no, that's fine, no problem, it didn't bother me at all. Meanwhile, you can't tell what I'm thinking. Some people can. And we certainly can feel that too. We start to feel it in ourselves. We start to feel that pain if we start to go away from what is true. And that's good. That's a warning. Pain is a warning to us that something is off. Something is wrong. And so when we feel that pain, it can just be mental, from our mental attitude causing us pain. So again, it means something is there to be healed. I brought up this word purification earlier at the purification ceremony. One of the challenges with the word purification, it needn't be there, but it can be, is that we can think of, yes, purify me of the impurities of which I have so many. Bad impurities, because I am so impure and I really need purification, but I have a lot of impurities. We end up just focusing on that. The need for purification. Woo! If you knew my consciousness, you would just get out the fire hose and start spraying me down. Thinking about what's wrong with us. And so for that reason, I said sometimes it can be helpful to think of purification also as healing. Because we don't often have the same thought with healing. Healing is sort of restore me to my original strength, or remove this unnatural sort of hurt or unnatural condition that I have to my normal state of health, or even improve my state of health. But health is the normal place to be, and ill health is abnormal. And so I just need to heal. I need to return. That's the same thing that purification is. Purification is removing of things that aren't you. So that's all. As any of these things, if they can be taken from you, they're not you. And so that it's helpful to remember that that is our state. So I read this in the Ramayana so many years ago, And I said, I kind of like that. It's practical. It's something that I can understand. It's not even just innocence, humility, truthfulness, strength, which are still concepts. How did he behave? As I said, he would forget kindness done to him that he did, but he would never forget kindness that was done to him. And so even Shakespeare wrote a line, what was it, that basically is blow thou winter wind, thou art not so unkind. Wind, it was really wind if you write it out, wind and kind. Anyway, it sort of rhymes, but never mind. Thou art not so unkind as benefits forgot, meaning as something that you had given to someone and they had forgotten it. It's all about basically spurned friendship, and that was one of the things. I did this kindness and it has been forgotten. And so, meaning not that, I totally know what that's like. No, that Rama never did that. He never forgot if somebody had done a kindness to him. And Master was the same way. Swamiji said with some people, that Master would give attention to, Swamiji said, you would think, what does he see in this person? Because there are so many obvious other qualities. But Master would say, yes, if someone would say, but sir, this person is this, and that, he would say, yes, but he's a good father to his children. But he's very sincere. Or he would always pull out some quality that the person was strong in and look to that and emphasize that. And this was another thing that Swamiji said he came to really appreciate about Master, was that he overlooked people's foibles. Now, a foible basically means a harmless little habit or attitude that somebody has. It's a minor thing. You wouldn't even call it like a minor defect. It's like, this person has a habit of kind of scratching their eyebrow when they're nervous. That's like a foible. It's like a little tiny, harmless habit. But the harmless habit of cutting everybody's head off and draining the blood and drinking it. The harmless habit of, bursting into tears at the slightest problem and bringing everybody down, down, down. The harmless habit of not showing up for work and dropping the ball and all that. These, what Master classified all of these as foibles. Little things. And the reason I know this is because that's what we saw in Swamiji. He did the same thing. He would be giving a lot of attention to someone. And sometimes I would wonder, I confess, what about all these other things, and how do they weigh in the balance, and is this person even going to stick around or whatever? Not flattering thoughts, not flattering to me. But Swamiji would always see the highest in that person. And sometimes it would draw the highest back out of that person, sometimes it wouldn't, or hard to say, but sometimes people would stay and sometimes they wouldn't. But that is just how he treated people. He overlooked their foibles. He even says in Living Wisely, Living Well, we read it recently, that pass through life like a great ocean liner, like a great ship. If you see qualities in others that attract you, invite them aboard. As passengers, the qualities. Invite those qualities aboard. If you see something good in someone that you admire, then try to adopt that yourself. Say, I'm inspired by the way that person is so disciplined. And when it comes to sort of counseling others sensitively, maybe they should just go back to their sadhana instead. But that's not the point. Why look at something that someone doesn't do all that well? Look at what they do well and appreciate that. Because why? Does it help the person? Maybe. It certainly helps better than constant silent criticism of them. Oh, I know you. You're just, that's not helpful. And does it just help us because it's better to think positive thoughts than negative thoughts? Sure. But as Dharmini was reading in the affirmation, and as we all said, for I know that as I view the world, so I myself become. If you view the goodness in others and you focus on that goodness, that's what we focus on, and that's what we become. You see, it's as I view, not what I view. Well, put me around some good things and then I'll view them. But until then, this is just No. It's that if you find the goodness in the situation, if you look for it, that's what will come out of you. That's what will grow in you. As jewelers, as Swamiji said, often have bright eyes. And when I read that, I thought, Abadiya. I thought of the few jewelers that I knew, and some of them had blue eyes and some had brown eyes, because maybe blue eyes sparkle, but had brown eyes might not, or really dark eyes might not. And I thought, it's true. Every jeweler I know has really bright, sparkly eyes. And not just because they see me coming and going, oh, okay, excellent. No, I'm joking. So as we look for the jewels around us, the jewels in each situation, the jewel in that person. And yes, sometimes we have to look hard. But if we find that jewel, then as we behold that jewel, we begin to sparkle. Because that's what we're looking for. And if we say, yeah, but there's a lot of other stuff, and that's pretty easy to see, and sure it is. But then remember Babaji's advice to Lahiri Mahashaya. This whole world is a mixture of sugar and sand. Be like the wise ant who seizes the sugar and leaves the sand untouched. And just imagine, two ants. One is going through the sand and seizing all the sugar. And the other one is saying, look at all the sand. Do you know there's a lot of sand here? See the sand. Is that more sand? Wow. Yes, there's sand. After about a day and a half on this planet, you discovered the sand. Or a year and a half of conscious living once we reach the age of sort of conscious awareness. We start to realize, yeah, there's some problems. So what? It takes no skill to see them. And in fact, it takes skill and strength to stop focusing on them, but to find the joy inside. And of course, that's what we've all done. That's what we're all doing. That's why we're here. That's why we are yogis and so on, practicing these things. So I read this description of Rama and I thought, well, okay, I like that. I'll admit it, I like that. And so I even sort of typed it up and printed it out and had it on my wall and so on. And some people would come in and read it and go, nice. And other people would come in and be like, what's that? And so, no, never mind. And so I was still quite, if you can't see the truth of it yourself, I needn't bother explaining. This kind of still very sort of intellectual and arrogant. But then when I found Autobiography of a Yogi, I was thrilled because here was the description of someone who lived like Rama. Not just who was described as that, but if you read, as Swamiji said, Master had the perfect reaction to every circumstance in his life. He had the perfect response to every challenge, to every success, to everything. That's what's so winning about the book on a human level. Is just that it's, wow, that's how I want to be too. If you read it carefully, or if you get that feeling. Some people don't really understand, but they like. And it was inspiring. One woman yesterday said, I got Autobiography of a Yogi, I read it, I finished it yesterday. And here I am now, coming for the level 1 class and so on. Because those of us who have had that magical experience with that book. And remember, Master said, as you all know from the movie, it has my vibrations in it. So remember that too, that what you get with the Autobiography of a Yogi is also Master's vibration. Not everybody can put their vibration in a book. Not everybody has a vibration you necessarily want to have in the book. But with Master's case, that power is there also to transform. It's not just that it's written well or what it's written about. It's also this vibration. That takes a subtler degree of awareness and feeling. It's not just of the mind. And the first way you feel that is, I like it. What do you like about it? I don't know, but I like it. That's good. That's the first feeling. Follow that. The more we meditate, the deeper we go on the path, we realize further growth comes in increasing our awareness, increasing our feeling. Well, what does that mean? How to define it? It's beautiful because Swamiji said those are two things you can't define. Feeling, awareness, consciousness. You can't define them. What is feeling? Awareness. What is awareness? Consciousness. What is consciousness? Feeling. Chitta. That's just it. What is awareness? No, awareness is perception. Okay, good. What's perception? The ability to perceive. Okay, what's that mean? It means to be aware. There's just no way to define it in the context of anything else. It's fundamental to our reality. It's sort of like, what's awareness? It means the show is on and I am watching. It's just, you have to begin there. And you end there, really, once it becomes infinite awareness. So that's why I say it's thrilling that you can't define it, because the mind says, how do I feel? What do I do to feel? What does it mean to feel? What does it mean to be aware? And it's not of the mind. It is more powerful than the mind. That's why it's so funny when people say, well, inanimate matter behaves in certain experiments with electrical shocks similar to animate matter, to living material. So in other words, metal can behave similarly to cells and biological tissue in certain stimulations. These experiments were done some time ago. And so the conclusion is, since animate and inanimate objects are the same, it means everything is unconscious. And Swamiji writes, isn't it amazing how people conclude consciously that everything is unconscious? It's sort of like, well, what brain is even thinking the thought? How do you spell unconscious? You have to have a brain, you have to be conscious in order to even know the word. So it's really funny how that comes about. So then another aspect of, as I said, getting onto the path was that, inspired by what I could become, and inspired then by reading Autobiography of a Yogi and seeing someone who had become more than I ever imagined one could become, and also giving a technique, Kriya Yoga, for how to do it, and giving another, being with the Guru. The thrilling chapter, Years in My Master's Hermitage, and all of the dialogues between Sri Yukteswar and Master just were so strengthening and so inspiring in the sense of lifting me out of just where I was looking. We need that inspiration. I don't know if you've had this experience, but it's quite amazing. In Seattle, for example, it's a place where there's a city, but there's a huge mountain, Mount Rainier, that's visible when it's not too cloudy or hazy or smoggy or whatever. And so people sort of have this thing of saying, oh, look, the mountain's out. I mean, it's not as if the mountain, maybe when there's fog, the mountain runs over, across the ocean and hangs out with other mountains, and then, oh, I better get back before the cloud passes. I don't know. But I assume the mountain is always there. But from our point of view, oh, the mountain's here today. It's out. And so when I was there, and I was visiting Seattle for the first time, and the mountain was not out, it was otherwise engaged, or it was out of station. Then on the last day, the haze cleared, and people said, oh, look, the mountain's out. And I looked and I said, where? And they said, look. I said, I don't see it. They said, look up. And oh my gosh, because it's so much higher than anything you see in sort of a normal landscape. And so even though I thought I was looking high, I wasn't looking high at all. And because of the way sort of the haze is, the very bottom of the mountain sometimes can be sort of hidden in blue. It can kind of almost look like the mountain is floating in the sky because of some optical thing or diffraction, or I don't remember why these things are. But so it isn't as if, well, didn't you notice like the big dark part of a triangle below it? No, it was sort of hidden. But you look up, wow. And we need to look up so we can redefine what is up. I thought this was high. Then I read the Ramayana, and I said, well, the greats of human accomplishment can be even higher. And of course, Rama was an avatar. It's not a limitation on him, but it was what I could get from that paragraph was only this much. Then I read Autobiography of a Yogi. Wow. And so we need to set our sights high. That's what we're doing constantly. But we need to do it constantly, because it's, don't forget, there's gravity. Yes, definitely, from now on. That force we're always resisting. And just whether you load up a YouTube video, whether you listen to a song like we did this morning that just seemed to bring in a breath of fresh air, whether you talk to a friend, whether you come here and meditate, whether you meditate at home, anything. but we're always having to keep that sort of balloon in the air. You know, you have the game of don't let the balloon touch the floor, and you keep tapping it to, has anyone ever played this game? Okay, yes, all right, good. Sort of, why would you ever do that with a balloon? Well, I mean, what else is there to do except pop it? So I was sort of inspired by this autobiography of a yogi consciousness of what an ideal person could be. And I then went to a sort of discussion, and a person from another religion was coming to present the teachings of their religion, but also answer questions. And so it was questions and answers about this religion. I don't want to say it for no harm, but I don't want to cast, just in this particular light of the discussion. And I wanted to somehow say, gosh, all the religion I've been exposed to has been, as Swamiji said, 1 horsepower. Just very low in its sights. And in the mountain was not a mountain, but just a tiny hill. It wasn't the fault of the religion or of the founder of the religion, but just the trickled down thing that I had perceived. I can't even blame the people, but that's all I was able to get from it was nothing. And so I wanted to go to this discussion and basically say, can we talk about yoga and autobiography of a yogi and so on? But I knew that wasn't polite because, after all, I didn't have the microphone. This other person did. And I didn't want to just say, in yoga it says all these wonderful things, and that's actually more interesting to me because, it was their show. But it was questions and answers. So I thought, what could I ask that could possibly guide the conversation in an interesting way, as opposed to, this is what we believe. Well, good for you. And it's fine. And this is what they believe, and this is what the others believe, and that's interesting, but how can it be, what can we gain? What's the benefit of these beliefs? How do they help us? And so I sort of cooked up a question, and I asked the person, how does your religion describe the ideal human being? How should they behave? And so on. And I was tempted to say, in case you don't have an answer, there's in the Ramayana, it says, he was nice to people, and, but it was like, is that ever written down anywhere? This is how you should behave. And the person said, wow, the behavior of an ideal human being. That is a good question. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. And it's not that religion doesn't teach that, but that wasn't the emphasis. It might have been just on worshiping rather than on what we are becoming. And that's a valid emphasis. But I was all for, what can I do to make my life better? And so, in fact, word got back to me, because this person was the head of a religious community, that she had gotten a question that had stumped her. She was saying, from some college kid. And the friend of mine said, it's not easy to stump her. But it wasn't through any brilliance of mine. It was because I was bringing in a whole different point of view, a whole different orientation, which I had gotten from the study of yoga and from these scriptures. So let us keep these things in mind, all these qualities that Dharmini mentioned. And I have to say also that what made the Gita real for me, and what makes this statement, let me reread it, real for me, these qualities: humility, unpretentiousness, harmlessness, forgiveness, integrity, service to the Guru, purity of mind and body, steadfastness, self-control, indifference to sense objects, lack of emphasis on one's own self, perception of the sufferings and evils inherent in birth, illness, old age, and death, non-attachment, non-identification of the ego with one's own children, wife, and home, and with everything that these entail, equal acceptance of both fortune and misfortune, unswerving devotion to and identity with me, through yoga practice, love of solitude, disinclination for worldly society, perseverance in the pursuit of self-knowledge, aspiration toward true wisdom, which is the goal of all learning. What made this statement in the Gita real for me was not just that Krishna had said it, and not just because Master and Swamiji had explained it, but because I saw these qualities in Swami Kriyananda. and in Yoganandaji, but of course Swami Kriyananda in person. And that's what made me believe that this was possible. And that's what made me be able to say, yes, I have seen that. Not I imagined it, not I understand it, but I have seen it. That's what helped me realize that the mountain of this was way up there beyond what I had ever imagined might be possible. And so let us cling to these beautiful and life-saving gifts that God has given us in Master and in Swamiji, and have always our sights set on the highest. God bless you.